Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about something that may sound heavy at first. You may have even felt it in your bones before you ever heard the words, "God said the collapse has begun." Now, I know that phrase might stir fear in some. Collapse? That doesn't sound like a motivational message, does it? But I want to challenge that thinking today, because sometimes collapse isn't punishment. It's permission. Collapse is the beginning of the clearing. It's where comfort dies and calling is born. It's the moment where everything false falls away and everything true steps forward. So today I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to remind you purpose always begins at the end of something else. Define the collapse. When we hear the word collapse, our instincts tell us to brace for impact. We think disaster, we think failure, we think something has gone terribly wrong. But here's a truth that few people talk about. Collapse is not always a sign of failure. In fact, many times, collapse is the signal that you're being called to something higher. Collapse is the beginning of the shedding, the pruning, the clearing out. It's when everything you built on shaky foundations starts to fall apart. Not to punish you, but to free you. We are taught to pursue stability, control, predictability. We structure our lives, our careers, our identities in such a way that any deviation from the plan feels like danger. We cling to the job title, the relationship, the image, the routine, because we think these things make us secure. But when God says the collapse has begun, what he's really saying is, I am disrupting everything that's keeping you stuck, removing what you've been leaning on so you can learn how to stand on me. In leadership, we often use the word pivot, a soft word that makes disruption sound strategic. But collapse? Collapse sounds messy. It sounds out of control. It sounds terrifying. But here's the shift in perspective that changes everything. Collapse is the honest mirror. It's the moment you see what you've built and realize what can't go any further. It's where the illusions break, the masks fall off. The story you've been telling yourself doesn't hold up anymore. And that's where truth gets a voice. God never collapses something just for the sake of pain. He collapses structures that are misaligned with your assignment. That job you were once passionate about, maybe it's become a cage. That relationship you've been holding on to out of fear, maybe it's become a wall between you and your destiny. That version of yourself that helped you survive, maybe it's now keeping you from thriving. So when the collapse begins, don't ask, why me? Ask, what is God revealing to me right now? In business, when an organization begins to collapse, leaders often scramble to fix the outer symptoms. Sales decline, team turnover, negative feedback. But the real issue isn't out there, it's in the culture, the vision, the alignment of values. That's how life works too. We treat the symptoms of collapse, fatigue, anxiety, burnout, confusion, but we rarely stop to address the root. I am living in misalignment with my purpose. And that's the real invitation of the collapse, not to fix it, but to feel it, to see it, to sit with it long enough to ask, what have I built that can't carry me into my next chapter? Collapse forces you to strip away everything that's not rooted in truth. It demands you look at yourself with honesty. It humbles you, but it also awakens you. SEMON SINEK often says that leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of the people in your charge. But before you can lead others through uncertainty, you have to lead yourself through collapse. You have to learn how to pause when everything is falling apart and choose purpose over panic. You have to become the kind of person who understands that when everything you leaned on is gone, what's left is you. And if you don't know who that is, if you'd never asked why you do what you do, then the collapse will feel like death. But if you have, then you'll realize the collapse is just birth in disguise. God said the collapse has begun, not to destroy your life, but to deliver your soul, not to leave you in ruins, but to rebuild you from the root. Because the version of you that survives the collapse, that's the one who's ready to lead, ready to rise, ready to walk into what's next, not with fear, but with clarity. The power of the breakdown. There's a unique kind of silence that fills the air after collapse. It's the kind of silence that makes you question everything. Your choices, your timing, your calling. It's raw, it's unnerving, but it's also sacred, because in that space, in that stillness, you begin to understand the power of the breakdown, not as a threat, but as a tool. Not as the end, but as a threshold. The breakdown isn't your enemy, it's your escort into purpose. In life, we often measure strength by our ability to hold things together. We say things like, I've got this, I'm holding on. I can handle it. But real strength isn't about resisting the fall. It's about knowing when to surrender to it. Because the fall is where revelation lives. The breakdown is where truth finally catches up to your schedule. It's the moment when God whispers what you've been too busy or too scared to hear. This isn't working anymore. Every breakdown is a breaking open. It's a spiritual surgery. It cuts away what's infected. It removes what's dying. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts, but it heals. God doesn't waste breakdowns. He uses them. He allows them not to shame you, but to shake you free. Free from pretending, free from performance, free from the version of you that's always hustling for worth instead of resting in identity. Simon Sinek teaches that great leaders are the ones who go first, the ones who step into the unknown and model vulnerability. That's what the breakdown does. It invites you to go first, not to lead with answers, but to lead with authenticity. When everything you relied on stops working, it exposes where your security was misplaced. And that's not failure, that's feedback. That's the moment when God peels back the curtain and says, this is the part of you I want to grow. And that invitation is never convenient, but it's always necessary. Breakdowns are not random, they're rhythmic. They come at the moment of greatest growth. Like labor pains before birth, they come to prepare the way. Not one moment too early, not one moment too late. And if you pause long enough to listen, you'll realize the collapse was custom designed to strip you down to your core so that you could rebuild on something eternal. In our culture, we glorify busyness. We reward burnout. We admire people who push through the pain. But in doing so, we've lost the art of breakdown. We've forgotten that collapse isn't always chaos. It can be a calling. What if the pain isn't a signal to quit? What if it's a signal to listen more closely? What if it's the sign that you're outgrowing the old story and God is writing a new one? The breakdown reminds you that no title, no salary, no applause, no relationship, no possession can carry the weight of your soul. It brings you back to the basics. Who are you when everything is stripped away? Who are you without the brand, the followers, the validation? Who are you in the silence? That's the moment where leadership is born. Not in the success, but in the surrender. Not when you're in control, but when you're finally open enough to admit you're not. The power of the breakdown is that it doesn't leave you the same. It confronts you, it transforms you. It's not just a plot twist in your story, it's a reset of your identity. It invites you to lead with empathy because you've been there. It gives you compassion because you've lived it. It grounds you in humility because you've tasted helplessness. And it equips you with wisdom not from theory, but from fire-tested experience. So don't despise the breakdown. Don't rush past it. Sit with it, learn from it, let it shape you into someone who doesn't just survive change, but leads through it with purpose, with heart, and with a deep understanding that collapse is not the end of your calling. It's where your calling finally becomes real. Reconnecting with why, when the collapse happens, it's easy to get lost in the noise, the chaos of questions, the panic of uncertainty, the fear that maybe you've made a mistake. Everything in you wants to fix it, reverse it, or at the very least understand it. But the truth is, collapse doesn't come with instructions, it comes with revelation. And the first step to finding that revelation is reconnecting with your why. Because when everything else fails, your why is the only thing that can hold you steady. Simon Sinek has often said that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But it goes far deeper than business or branding. It applies to your soul. You don't keep going because of the paycheck, you don't keep fighting because of the pressure. You keep going because of the purpose. And when that purpose is rooted in something deeper than pride or performance, you can endure almost anything. But when you lose your why, even the smallest storm feels like the end. That's why God allows the collapse, because over time, we all drift. We start off with vision, but then we get distracted by validation. We start with calling, but then we chase clout. We start with a mission, but eventually we bow to metrics. And before we know it, we're successful and empty. We're applauded but disconnected. We're admired but miserable. So God, in His mercy, shakes the whole thing, not to break us down, but to bring us back. Reconnecting with your why is not a cute exercise, it's spiritual survival. It's the moment you stop asking, how do I fix this, and start asking, why did I start this in the first place? What was the fire that used to burn in you before burnout set in? What was the dream that made you cry not because it was popular, but because it was pure? What did God whisper to you before you got busy building something people would approve of? When the collapse begins, your strategy won't save you. Your titles won't save you. Your followers won't save you. Only your why can hold you together, because your why is the anchor. Your why is the reminder. Your why is the part of you that was there before the world had an opinion. And when you find it again, when you sit in the silence and ask God, remind me why you called me, that's when the rebuilding truly begins. The greatest leaders are not the ones who have the most answers, the biggest platforms, or the best branding. They are the ones who return to their why over and over again. They don't let the noise of collapse drown out the voice of purpose. They're not swayed by pressure or panic because they've done the deep inner work of asking, what am I doing this for? They've faced the collapse not as a curse, but as a compass, pointing them back to the essence of who they are. Reconnecting with your why doesn't always mean going back to what you used to do. Sometimes it means returning to who you were when you were still brave enough to believe. It means letting go of what made you popular so you can chase what makes you free. It means surrendering the plan and trusting the process. Because the truth is, your why is not about you. It's about who you're called to impact. It's about the lives that only your voice, your presence, your scars, your story can reach. God doesn't allow collapse to leave you broken. He allows it to reintroduce you to yourself, to strip away the titles, the roles, the false identities, and bring you face to face with your original design. The collapse isn't meant to end your mission, it's meant to clarify it, to reconnect you with the reason you were called in the first place, to remind you that your why isn't optional, it's everything. It's what makes the pain worth it. It's what turns falling apart into falling into purpose. Rise with intention after the dust of collapse settles and the silence grows familiar. You're faced with a moment that separates people who merely survive from those who rise transformed. That moment is filled with choice. And the choice is not whether or not to rise, because eventually life will push you forward again. The real choice is how you rise. Will you rise with panic or will you rise with purpose? Will you rise to rebuild the same thing that fell, or will you rise with intention and build something new that actually aligns with who you've become? Intentionality is the greatest gift collapse can offer you. Because once the structures fall, once the roles disappear, you're left with something most people avoid their whole lives: clarity. You begin to see what mattered and what didn't. You begin to realize what was real and what was a performance. And you begin to understand that just because something worked before doesn't mean it should be part of your future. Rising with intention means you stop trying to go back. It means you stop chasing what used to be and start listening to what needs to be born now. Simon Sinek often speaks of the difference between finite and infinite thinking. Finite thinking focuses on winning the short game, pleasing the crowd, reaching milestones that make us feel safe or successful. Infinite thinking asks, what am I building that will matter long after I'm gone? That's what rising with intention is all about. You no longer care about being impressive, you care about being impactful. You're no longer concerned with how many people applaud you, you're focused on how many people are changed by your presence. When you rise with intention, you give yourself permission to let go of speed. You stop rushing to rebuild and you start listening. You listen to your soul. You listen to God. You listen to the small, quiet, unshakable truths that survive the collapse. You start to ask different questions. What do I value now? Who do I want to become? What do I need to say no to, even if it's good, so I can say yes to what is right? The most powerful leaders are not the ones who do more, they're the ones who do less with greater focus. Rising with intention isn't about proving something, it's about aligning everything. It's about recognizing that energy is a currency, and if you're going to spend it, it better be on something that adds value to your life and to others. That means you stop chasing every opportunity and start creating space for only the ones that carry purpose. You don't say yes out of fear of missing out, you say yes because it's a full-body yes in your spirit. You also begin to understand that rising intentionally requires boundaries. You can't take everyone with you. Not everyone who stood with you before the collapse will walk with you after it. And that's okay, because rising with intention means choosing depth over popularity. It means finding your tribe, your truth, and your rhythm, not to gain approval, but to stay aligned with your assignment. And finally, rising with intention means you walk slowly but surely into what God is now revealing. You let your values dictate your decisions. You build based on what matters, not what sells. You serve from overflow, not obligation. You lead not because you want to be followed, but because you're committed to walking in the direction of purpose, and others just happen to be inspired along the way. Collapse may have shaken you, but it didn't destroy you. And that's the evidence of something powerful. You still have breath, you still have vision, you still have the ability to choose. And if you rise with intention, not only will you come out stronger, you'll come out clearer, wiser, and finally aligned with the life you were born to live. Trust the invisible work. One of the most uncomfortable realities of the collapse is this: even when you rise with intention, you won't immediately see results. The world teaches us to expect instant reward. Start a new chapter, and you should feel empowered. Let go of the old, and you should feel free. Say yes to your purpose, and everything should fall into place. But it doesn't. Not right away. Because there's an invisible layer of growth that takes place before anything external shifts. And that's where trust is born. Trusting the invisible work means accepting that God is doing more behind the scenes than you can see with your eyes. It's understanding that the silence is not abandonment, it's preparation. That the delay is not denial, it's development. That the space between collapse and completion is sacred ground, not wasted time. In this space, you're not building a brand, a platform, or even a plan. You're building you, your character, your conviction, your clarity. Simon Sinek often reminds us that people will follow you not because of what you do, but because of what you believe. And belief is forged in the invisible. It's easy to say you believe when everything is working. But when nothing is visible, when doors are closed, when the path is unclear, when affirmation is silent, that's when belief becomes real. That's when you decide once and for all who you are and what you stand for. This is the part of the journey most people run from, because it doesn't look impressive. There are no highlights to post, no applause, no measurable success, just quiet obedience, just small, consistent acts of faith, just waking up and showing up and trusting that your next step matters, even when it doesn't feel like it's moving anything. But that's the hidden strength of real leadership. The ability to keep going when no one's watching, the decision to keep building when no one is clapping, the courage to hold the vision even when the results don't validate it yet. The invisible work is where endurance is born, it's where ego dies and humility rises, it's where you stop hustling for validation and start aligning with your values, and it's where God does his deepest work, not by changing your circumstances, but by refining your inner life. You start to notice things, you start to see what used to trigger you and realize you've grown. You notice how you used to crave approval, but now you crave alignment. You feel less pressure to prove yourself and more peace in just being yourself. Trusting the invisible work is also about learning to lead differently, not from anxiety, but from assurance, not from fear of the unknown, but from a deep trust in what God has already spoken. It's about knowing that even when nothing looks like progress, everything is still moving. You're becoming the kind of person who doesn't just react to what happens, you respond from a place of vision. You're learning to lead not from outcomes, but from identity. This is why collapse is often followed by quiet. Because in the quiet, the foundation is rebuilt. In the stillness, you start to recognize the voice of God again. And that voice doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It whispers. It invites. It reminds you that your value was never in what you could produce. It was always in who you are. So you keep walking. You keep showing up. You keep tending the unseen places of your life, because what you're building now isn't just for today, it's for the future. The invisible work is the groundwork for what the world will one day call overnight success, but you'll know better. You'll know it was years of trusting what no one else could see. You'll know it was the result of choosing faith over fear, discipline over distraction, and purpose over popularity. You'll know that when God said, "The collapse has begun," it was never a threat, it was an invitation. An invitation to trust the process even when the progress was invisible.